What is happening, everybody? I hope you're all well, and welcome back to Dragon Age 2. Now, as always, this is not going to be a main episode of the Let's Play. This is going to be a Codex lore reading episode. If that's not something you're interested in, go ahead and click away now and wait for a main episode of the Let's Play. If that is something you're interested in, then come on this journey with me. We got quite a lot of codexes to read, and I got my coffee here, so should be good. We have, I think, like 20-something codexes to read here, so it's going to be a long one. We are starting first things first with the Anderfels. The Anderfels. The Anderfels are a land of shocking extremes. It is the most desolate place in all the world. For two blights have left great expanses of the steppes so completely devoid of life that corpses cannot even decay there. No insect or grub will ever reach them. It is a land filled with wonders like the Murdain, with its gigantic white statue of Our Lady carved into its face, her hands outstretched and bearing an eternal flame, or Weisshaupt Fortress, with its walls of living rock towering over the desolate plains below. The Anders, too, are a people of extremes. The most devout priests and the most deadly soldiers, the poorest nation in the world and the most feared. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetive. Yeah, the Anderfels is where the first Blight took place, and it's also the home and origin story of the Grey Wardens. Weisshaupt Fortress is their thing. So that place has been dead for a long time. Kirkwall, Hightown. At the height of the Tevinter Imperium's slave trade, Kirkwall's elite prospered beyond dreams of avarice. Hightown was built for the wealthiest slavers, its glitzy mansions rising atop a great wall of rock that borders, on one side, the waking sea. Lowtown cowered on its other side until Kirkwall's slaves rose to plunder and destroy Hightown's riches. Today, Hightown's prominent buildings are the Keep, home to the ruling Viscount, and the Chantry, home to the Grand Cleric and the city's religious center. Both are converted estates that once housed wealthy magisters, rebuilt and converted after the uprising. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetive. Vollen, the occupied North. In the 30th year of the Steel Age, the first Coterie ships were sighted off the coast of Vollen in the far north, marking the beginning of a new age of warfare. History calls this first Coterie War, but it was mostly a one-sided bloodbath, with the Coterie advancing far into the mainland. Coterie warriors in glittering steel armor carved through armies with ease. Their cannons, the likes of which our ancestors had never seen, reduced city walls to rubble in a matter of seconds. Stories of Coterie occupation vary greatly. It is said they dismantled families and sent captives to learning camps for indoctrination into their religion. Those who refused to cooperate disappeared to mines or construction camps. For every tale of suffering, however, there is another of enlightenment deriving from something called the Qun. This is either a philosophical code or a written text that governs all aspects of Coterie life, perhaps both. One converted Saharan, reported pity for those who refused to embrace the Qun, as if the conquerors had led him to a sort of self-discovery. For all my life, I followed the Maker wherever his path led me, he wrote. But in the Qun, I have found the means to travel my own path. It has been said that the most complete way to wipe out a people is not with blades, but with books. Thankfully, a world that has repelled 4 blights would not easily bow to a foreign aggressor, and so the exalted marches began. The greatest advantage of the Chantry-led forces was the Circle of Magi. For all their technology, the Coterie appeared to harbor great hatred for magic. Faced with cannons, the Chantry responded with lightning and balls of fire. The Coterie armies lacked the sheer numbers of humanity. So many were slain at Marnas Pel on both sides that the Vale is said to be permanently sundered, the ruins still plagued by restless corpses. But each year, the Chantry pushed further and further into the Coterie lines, although local converts to the Qun provided difficult to return to Andraste's teachings. By the end of the Storm Age, the Coterie were truly pushed back. Rivain was the only human land that retained the Canary religion after being freed, and its rulers attempted to barter a peace. Most human lands signed the Llomerryn Accord, accepting the Tevinter Imperium. It is a shaky peace that has lasted to this day. From the Exalted Marchers, an examination of Chantry warfare by Sister Patrine, Chantry scholar. And Rivain, I believe, is the only place, officially, that managed to remain under the Cune because they actually wanted to stay. And it goes pretty well. Like a lot of the Rivaini kept their own culture, but also signed on to the Cune because they have this the whole thing going on with witches and things like that. And honestly, I can see something like the Canary would be quite effective in real life too. I mean, you have strict orders, things like the Cune and doctrines like that. It's a little like the military, where it kind of removes the need for you to think, therefore removes the need of consequences to a degree, because there's an answer for everything. You never have to make this big grand moral decision because you have the answer written right there on the paper. And this way, being the Cune, you're assigned your role, and that's what you are. You don't have to worry about rising through the ladders and becoming this or that and money and all this stuff. You just are what you are. If you're a soldier, you're a soldier. If you're a baker, you're a baker. If you're a priest, you're a priest. There's no changing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about any of that. And I can see that being pretty appealing to a lot of people. It's one of the things that make the Canary so interesting is this moral doctrine. It's too bad they walked away from that in Veilguard, but this is not Veilguard. This is a much better game, so we continue. The City of Starkhaven. Starkhaven, the largest city in the Free Marchers, sits on the bank of the great Minanta River. I remember my visit to the city quite clearly. I was taken up the river by barge, a cumbersome vessel that moved at a stately pace, and disembarked by the city's central square, an impressive space with marble fountains and surrounded by kingly estates. Starkhaven's wealth was truly a sight to behold. A path paved in granite led up to the grandest building I've ever seen. My guide indicated that this was the residence of Starkhaven's ruler, Prince Vael. We supped at the table of my guide's closest friend. I was presented with a variety of dishes from the region. One in particular stood out, fish and egg pie, Starkhaven's most famous dish. 3 deboned fish, caught just that day, were cooked in a porcelain vessel with boiled eggs, dried fruit, spices, and thickened cream, all topped with a light crust. Superb. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitive. And oh boy, we have a lot in this section. Alright, I'm gonna need my quick little sip of coffee for this. The History of the Chantry, Chapter 1. The first Blight devastated the Tevinter Imperium. Not only had the Darkspawn ravaged the countryside, but Tevinter citizens had to face the fact that their own gods had turned against them. Dumas, the old god once known as the Dragon of Silence, had risen to silence the world, and despite the frenzied pleas for help, the other old gods did nothing. The people of the Imperium began to question their faith, murdering priests and burning temples to punish their gods for not returning to help. In those days, even after the devastation of the First Blight, the Imperium stretched across the known world. Fringed with barbarian tribes, the Imperium was well prepared for invasions and attacks from without. Fitting, then, that the story of its downfall begins from within, as do most slave nations. Look at Sparta. The people of the far northern eastern reaches of the Imperium rose up against their powerful overlords in rebellion. The Tevinter Magisters summoned demons to put down these small rebellions, leaving corpses to burn as examples to all who would dare revolt. The Imperium began to tear itself apart from within. Throngs of angry and disillusioned citizens doing what centuries of opposing armies could not. But the Magisters were confident in their power, and they could not imagine surviving a blight only to be destroyed by their own subjects. Even after the blight, Tevinter commanded an army larger than that of any other organized nation in Thedas, but that army was scattered and its morale dwindling. The ruin of Tevinter was such that the Alamari barbarians, who had spread their clans and holds over the wilderness of the Ferelden Valley at the far southeast edge of the Imperium, saw weakness in their enemy, and, after an age of oppression, embarked on a campaign not only to free their own lands, but to bring down mighty Tevinter as well. The leaders of that blessed campaign were the great barbarian warlord, Mafarath, and his wife Andraste. Their dreams and ambitions would change the world forever. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Genetive, Chantry scholar, and that eventually led obviously to Mafarath betraying Andraste, the Maker supposedly returning her to his side, and then eventually all those Alamari tribes in Ferelden actually became the first Arls, and that's how you end up with Ban Tegan and All Rendon Howe and All Mathis Cousland and all those cool names. That's how you end up with all that, is those Alamari tribes eventually shook hands and settled peace deals, and that became the Ferelden that we see in Dragon Age Origins. A Study of the Fifth Blight, Volume 1. While some of my contemporaries dispute whether the Fifth Blight was a true blight or merely a large darkspawn resurgence, historians agree that it began in the swamps of the Coterie wilds on the southeastern border of Ferelden in the year 930 Dragon. King Caelan Therin was swift in responding to the threat, gathering the royal army, every Grey Warden in his country, and sending a call for aid to the Ferelden nobility. The assembled armies laid a trap in the ruins of Ostagar, hoping to crush the force before it reached civilization. But they failed. Darkspawn overran the defenders of Ostagar and decimated the king and his army. They continued their advance into Ferelden unopposed. Only 2 Grey Wardens managed to escape the slaughter, and somehow they came into possession of ancient treaties which compelled the races of men to join arms against the massing horde. The surviving Wardens made their way to Kinloch Hold, home of the Ferelden Circle, and conscripted the mages. In desperation to find more allies, the Wardens journeyed into the Brazilian forest, seeking the Dalish. The elves, too, joined the growing army. Into the deep roads the surviving Wardens went, searching for Paragon Branca in hopes she could settle the unrest in Orzammar and unite the dwarves in the battle against the Archdemon. Branca could not be located, but another Paragon was found, the legendary Caradin, who forged a crown that ended all question of succession. Pyral Haramon was crowned King of Orzammar, and the Dwarven armies marched for the surface. Despite their successes, though, greater challenges were yet to come. From A Study of the Fifth Blight by Sister Patrine, Chantry scholar. It sounds like, since this is the official story, it sounds like the dwarves expunged Branca's thing out of the histories. I guess they didn't feel like telling the whole dwarven people how one of their paragons blighted their entire house and sold them all down the shitter into ruin so that they could make golems again. I guess they thought that was a little too delicate to put in the shaper, huh? So much for history's integrity. What do they say, though? The victors write history. No shit. The Kirkwall City Guard. It is with pride that I, your Viscount, grant the authority of law and civil enforcement upon the guardsmen of an independent Kirkwall. No more will we defer to the will of foreign troops, or draw a holy order into tasks unbefitting their mandate. These proud men and women will be of the people and will enforce the laws we have elected for a civil and ordered society. And should the spectre of invasion return, the noble guardsmen will conscript from the population. For who better to amass the people's will than the constables of law charged with its inspection? So, Kirkwall used to be completely governed by Templars, it seems. It was a foreign army at first, and then Templars, and then they created the Guardsmen. This is a great day, fair Kirkwall, and I am honored to appoint the first guard captain. Long may he serve the will of a free people. From Orlesian Legacy, How Institutions of the Oppressors Linger, the speeches of Viscount Michel Raphael, collected by Philium, a bard. The Sermons of Divine Renata I. The weakness of mortal will is the great failing of all the Maker's children. We trade our honor as if it were the cheapest of currency. We do not understand what integrity is, or what it is truly worth. From this ignorance, original sin was born. Man, hitting hard out the bat, huh? I think a lot of people could read this part. At some time, each of us has thought, what does it matter if I keep hold of my integrity? I am but one mortal. I am powerless. How blind we all are. The virtue of a single slave destroyed the Tevinter Imperium. The dishonor of one man drove the Maker from our side. I tell you truly, nothing but the integrity of our hearts will win the love of the Maker back to us. It is all the power we shall ever possess to change this world for good or for ill. From a sermon on integrity. I actually think that makes quite a lot of sense. Like, even if you're not somebody who is religious, there isn't much you control in life but your own actions. And if you can make the world a better place or a worse place with your actions, instead of just looking out for your own self-interest, smile at somebody. Say good morning when you walk by them. Yeah, ask somebody how their day's going. Do something for somebody. Somebody want a favor? You can go ahead and do it for them, within reason, of course, but just little things like that. And I don't think you should compromise your moral code. Like, whatever that is. There isn't necessarily... Well, of course I believe there is a correct moral code, but that's because it's mine, and everybody sees that the same way. So whatever your moral code might be, don't go against that. Don't go against that for business. Don't go against that for love. Don't go against that for friendship. Like, nothing. What you think is right and wrong is very important, and your actions based on that is about the only thing you can control in life, so act accordingly. That's what I'd say about that. The Enigma of Kirkwall. The Viscount is suspicious, but the bribe was sufficient to gain access to the restricted section of the archives. The money would have been better spent elsewhere, the archives being almost devoid of Imperium-era records. When the slaves revolted, they hunted magisters and burned the city, at least the parts that could be burned. One account says that the streets were littered with piles of scrolls and books set aflame. Is that quest futile? Did the slaves destroy the answer? As Mafarath's armies toppled the Imperium, they sent 3 magisters and their legions here. They never arrived. But why march here of all places? What were they coming here for? Behind a panel with curious markings, signed, The Band of 3. We will get more on this as we go. It's quite interesting, actually. The Llomerryn Accords. 50 years. That's how long it took the Imperium to drive out the Coterie occupation. But the rest of northern Thedas was not so lucky. Both divines, white and black, declared exalted marchers, and for the only time since the schism of the Chantry, they worked together. A century-long siege resulted, with the giant Coterie entrenched in Antiva and Ravane, and all of Thedas throwing armies against them. The war drained the resources of every nation in Thedas, leaving most on the brink of collapse. For the Giants, it did not appear to be the damage to their armada or the loss of their soldiers, but the terrible toll upon the Ravani population that prompted their retreat. When the third new exalted march had all but massacred the people of Kantar, without even chipping the Coterie occupying force, the Giants finally withdrew. The treaty that put up an official end to the Coterie Wars was signed on the politically neutral island of Llomerryn off the southern coast of Ravane. 150 years after their assault on the mainland began, the Coterie left our shores. They received the northern archipelago in exchange for cessation of hostilities against all the nations on the Accord. Only Tevinter refused to sign, and so the war continues to rage in the Imperium to the present day. It's worth noting, however, that the Kingdom of Ravane immediately violated the treaty. Twice. Once, when the humans of northern Ravane, nearly all practitioners of the Qun, and therefore by definition, Qunari, refused to leave their homes and go into exile to the islands. And again, when the Ravane Chantry and nationalist forces, unable to convert its people back to the worship of the Maker, tried a purge by the sword, slaughtering countless unarmed people and burying them in mass graves. It's a fortunate mystery that the leaders in Kantar did not alert their allies in the Northern Passage, or we'd still be fighting the Giants now. From the Exalted Marchers, an examination of Chantry warfare by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. So interesting to note there that the Coterie were actually not holding up too bad in this war, and the reason they eventually decided to call it a day was the converted followers. The bloodshed of its converts in those areas were the reason they decided to fall back. So they're not the big heartless giants after all, right? They protected their people in the only way that they could. which was fallen back. I think that's very worthy of taking note to, that the reason they surrendered was not because of their own people or their armies, because of the people they converted. And also interesting to note that, of course, after the occupation ended, they couldn't get these people back into worshiping the Maker. The Qun had already taken hold. Now, you could say that that was because of indoctrination. I'm sure that's what the Chantry would say, but maybe the faith just stuck. We haven't seen how people are inducted into the Qun. Are they put into some kind of brainwashing camp? We know that the Ben Hassaroth have the ability to re-educate people, but we also know that they don't always do that. Like, you're born into the Qun as a Qunari, and then only if you rebel or don't take to it are you ever re-educated. So you're not always re-educated. Let's see, we have surface dwarves. Surface dwarves. In Orzammar, dwarven society is divided into rigid castes with houses that compete for power and prestige. But all that is discarded when a dwarf abandons the stone for the surface. Under the open sky, everyone is equal, or so the story goes. The truth is that thousands of years of tradition are not so easily tossed aside. Even though surface dwarves are officially stripped of their caste, many maintain a hierarchy among themselves along the old caste lines. Formerly noble houses are accorded more respect than casteless brands who come up in search of opportunity. The poorest, noble dwarf, on the surface, looks upon the rich, lower caste dwarves with contempt. Upper-class surface dwarf society is roughly divided into two camps. Kalners, who insist on maintaining caste and rank, typically those from noble or merchant caste families, and Descendants, who believe in leaving Orzammar's traditions underground and embracing life in the sunlit world. And interestingly enough, the Kalners is the family that the Tetris family joined up with. That's Varric and Bartrand. They joined up with the Kalners when they were exiled because their dad was fixing proving matches. So that's an interesting little tie-in there. Maintaining some tie to Orzammar was seen for generations as the only lifeline for surface dwarves. Bringing surface goods to their kin underground and lyrium and metals to the surface was not only the most lucrative means of making a living, but also a sort of sacred duty, as many surface dwarves willingly accepted exile and the loss of their caste to better serve their house or patron. In recent years, many surface dwarves, particularly Ascendants, have branched out. They started banks, mercenary companies, and overland trade caravans. They became investors and speculators in purely surface trade. These new industries have proven tremendous sources of wealth, but are looked down upon by their more conservative kin. For less affluent surface dwarves, association with a powerful Kalnar can open many doors. They can get credit with dwarven merchants and are offered work opportunities by the powerful dwarven merchants guild more readily. Sometimes, they're then more qualified but less connected individuals. From the Dowager's Field Guide to Good Society by Lady Alcyone. So Varric and Bartrand are actually big players inside the Merchants Guild. They kind of are in charge of it. Not directly, there's a couple heads above the ladder, but they're pretty relevant inside the Merchants Guild. The Coterie. Kirkwall is built on a solid foundation of greed and human suffering, and its underworld is a place where everything is for sale, and everyone is fair game. There are many criminal empires within the city, some of which have been around since the Imperium used Kirkwall as a hub in the slave trade. Alliances, spying, manipulation, betrayal, and open warfare is all commonplace in the never-ending struggle for power. The Coterie is a thieves' guild that has been around for almost a century, but until recently was never a major player in the underworld. Some 20 years ago, the strongest of the local criminal empires was an ancient guild known as the Sabrathan, but its leader was betrayed from within, and during the turmoil, the Coterie made a successful grab for power. Since then, they've sunk their claws into almost every level of Kirkwall, including the City Guard, the Dwarven Merchants Guild, and some of the most influential citizens in the city. It's safe to say that the Coterie gets a slice of every pie, and very little goes on in Kirkwall that escapes their notice. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Andraste, Bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea. that was set upon by the Tevinter Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the markets of Minrathous, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Alamari warlord. Each day she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Tevinter. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true god did. The Maker. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all the creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavishing devotion upon mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, and so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule all of creation. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return, to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. Andraste went back to her husband, Mafarath, and told him all that the Maker had revealed to her. Together, they rallied the Alamari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself. Fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew until there were a vast tide washing over the Imperium. And when Mafarath saw that the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last, the armies of Andraste and Mafarath stood before the very gates of Minrathous, but Andraste was not with them, for Mafarath had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to the Tevinter. For this, the Archon would give Mafarath all the lands to the south of the Waking Sea. And so, before all the armies of the Alamari and of Tevinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned, while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword, and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Mafarath, cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from creation, taking only Andraste with him. And Our Lady sits at his side, still, where she still urges him to take pity on his children, from the sermons of Justinian II. Yeah, that is a very old tale of envy and jealousy. It can be very easy to fall into that and create a schism between the haves and the have-nots. And he was leading the armies, he was the general, and he found himself not only all of his army looking towards Andraste like the savior, even though he's the general, and the only reason she had said armies, but then she is also the bride of the Maker, even though she's his wife. So she's also kind of cheating on him, right? As well as kind of co-opting his armies. Of course, the correct decision there would have been to lead your armies, win the war, and then, I don't know, leave or act accordingly after the fact, but, well, that's a tough spot to be in, and I think anybody could understand the worm that grew in his heart, right? One thing that this did just remind me of is, so I just beat Dragon Age Veilguard recently, and it actually explained the entire Elvish origin and the entire Elven pantheon, but you know what we never got a solid concrete answer on? Is the Maker. We never found out who this was. We learned the origins of the Blight, the origins of all the Elven pantheon, the origins of even the archdemons, and the old gods of Tevinter, which weren't actually gods at all, they were just blighted high dragons by the Elven pantheon. But it never did explain the Maker to us, or the Golden City, or any of that stuff. I guess we'll never get an answer on any of that, because I don't think they're ever making another game, so. The Commandments of the Maker. These truths the Maker has revealed to me. As there is but one world, one life, one death, there is but one God, and he is our Maker. They are sinners who have given their love to false gods. Magic exists to serve man, and never to rule over him. Foul and corrupt are they, who have taken his gift and turned it against his children. They shall be named Maleficar. accursed ones. They shall find no rest in this world or beyond. All men are the work of our Maker's hands, from the lowest slaves to the highest kings. Those who bring harm without provocation to the least of his children are hated and accursed by the Maker. Those who bear false witness and work to deceive others know this: there is but one truth. All things are known to our Maker, and he shall judge their lies. All things in this world are finite. What one man gains, another has lost. Those who steal from their brothers and sisters do harm to their livelihood and to their peace of mind. Our Maker sees this with a heavy heart. Transfigurations 1:1-5. The Maker. There was no word for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word, and his word became all that might be. Dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. And from it made his firstborn. And he said to them, in my image I forge you. To you I give dominion over all that exists. By your will may all things be done. Then, in the center of heaven he called forth a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne and sang hymns of praise unending. But their songs were the songs of the cobblestones. They shone with the golden light reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew on their own. And the voice of the Maker shook the fade, saying, in my image I have wrought my firstborn. You have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will all things are done, yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever-changing. And he knew he had wrought amiss. So the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took from the fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, here I decree opposition in all things, for earth, sky, for winter, summer, for darkness, light. By my will alone is balance sundered, and the world given new life. And no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. At last did the Maker form the living world, make men, immutable, as the substance of the earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, to you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the fade I crafted you, and to the fade you shall return, each night in dreams, that you may always remember me. And then the Maker sealed the gates of the Golden City, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. Threnodies 5:1-8. I adore this little section of this hymn that's in these games. I grant this gift, in your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. I love that. In your heart shall burn. I love that little piece right there. Chantry Hierarchy. The Divine is the titular head of the Chantry, although since the Schism split the Imperial Chantry into its own faction, there are now in fact two Divines at any one time. One Divine, informally called the White Divine, is a woman housed in the Grand Cathedral in Val Rayo. The other, known as the Black Divine, is a man housed in the Argent Spire in Minrathous. Neither Divine recognizes the existence of the other, and the informal names are considered sacrilegious. No matter the gender, a Divine is addressed as Most Holy or Your Perfection. Beneath the rank of Divine is the Grand Cleric. Each Grand Cleric presides over numerous chantries and represents the highest religious authority for their region. They travel to Val Rayo when the College of Clerics convenes, but otherwise remain where they are assigned. All Grand Clerics are addressed as Your Grace. Beneath the Grand Cleric is the Mother, or in the Imperial Chantry, the Father. If a mother is in charge of a particular chantry, revered is appended to her title. These are the priests responsible for administering the spiritual well-being of their flock. A mother or revered mother is addressed as Your Reverence. Brothers and sisters form the rank and file of the Chantry, and consist of three main groups: Affirmed, Initiates, and Clerics. Affirmed are the lay brethren of the Chantry, those regular folk who have turned to the Chantry for succor. Often they are people who have led a difficult or irreligious life, and have chosen to go into seclusion, or even orphans and similar unfortunates who were raised into the Chantry life. The Affirmed take care of the Chantry, and are in turn afforded a life of quiet contemplation, no questions asked. Only those folk who take vows become initiates. These are men and women in training, whether in academic knowledge or the martial skills of a warrior. All initiates receive an academic education, although only those who seek to become Templars learn how to fight in addition. Clerics are the true academics of the Chantry, those men and women who have dedicated themselves to the pursuit of knowledge. They are often found in Chantry archives, sages presiding over libraries of books and arcane knowledge. The most senior of these clerics, placed in charge of such archives, are given the title Elder, although such a rank is still beneath that of Mother. All other brothers and sisters are addressed simply by noting their title before their name, such as Brother Genitive. From a Guide for Ambassadors from Ravane. The Founding of the Chantry. Cordelius Draken, king of the city-state of Olay, was a man of uncommon ambition. In the year 15 Ancient, the young king began construction of a great temple dedicated to the Maker, and declared that by its completion, he would not only have united the warring city-states of the south, he would have brought Andrastian belief to the world. In 3 Ancient, the temple was completed. There, in its heart, Draken knelt before the eternal flame of Andraste, and was crowned ruler of the Empire of Olay. His first act as emperor declared the Chantry as the established Andrastian religion of the Empire. It took 3 years and several hundred votes before Olessa of Montsemard was elected to lead the new Chantry. Upon her coronation as divine, she took the name Justinia, in honor of the disciple who recorded Andraste's songs. In that moment, the ancient era ended, and the divine age began. From Ferelden, Folklore and History, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Interestingly enough, too, in the Dragon Age universe, they actually name the ages depending on what happens as the divine or somebody like that is becoming the new divine, basically. So when the season or the year is about to wrap up, the divine contemplates on what the new age will be, taking sights and occurrences, which is actually how the Dragon Age became the Dragon Age of the calendars, because she saw a dragon flying over. There was like smoke in the land, breathing fire everywhere. There was actually a little mini war with that dragon, and that's why she declared it the Dragon Age. So obviously here it was declared the Divine Age because it was the first divine at the start of the season. So that's an interesting little thing about the universe, that how they named the seasons and how we ended up in the games called the Dragon Age during said age. Hierarchy of the Circle. It is no simple matter safeguarding ordinary men from mages, and mages from themselves. Each circle tower must have some measure of self-government, for it is ever the Maker's will that men be given the power to take responsibility for our own actions, to sin and fail, as well as to achieve the highest grace and glory on our own strength. You who will be tasked with the protection of the circle must be aware of its workings. The first enchanter is the heart of any tower. He will determine the course his circle will take. He will choose which apprentices may be tested and made full mages, and you will work most closely with him. Assisting the first enchanter will be the senior enchanters, a small council of the most trusted and experienced magi in the tower. From this group, the next first enchanter is always chosen. Beneath the council are the enchanters. These are the teachers and mentors of the tower, and you must get to know them in order to keep your finger on the pulse of the circle, for the enchanters will always know what is happening among the children. All those who have passed their harrowing, but have not taken apprentices, are mages. This is where the most trouble in a circle lies, the idleness and inexperience of youth. The untested apprentices are the most numerous denizens of any tower, but they more often pose threats to themselves due to their lack of training than to anybody else. Knight Commander Serene of the Chantry Templars, in a letter to his successor. And we are almost done here. We got 2 things left to go, so here is Aveline Vallen. If it's family, you protect. Doesn't matter who it is, blood or not. Aveline was born in Orlais, but she never knew the country. Her father, Benoit de Lac, was a chevalier who lost his patron to the game of intrigue. He fled to Ferelden while Aveline was an infant, and though his holdings were meager, he was determined she would have the life he had lost. She would become a knight, no matter the cost. He eventually sold everything to sponsor Aveline into King Caelan's service. Knightly skills seemed bred into Aveline's bones, but she had her doubts. Starting with her namesake, Sir Aveline, the first female knight of Orlais, was orphaned, mocked for her looks, and murdered when she dared stand with men in the tournament. Her glory lies in tragedy, but the living Aveline doesn't revere sacrifice. A principled death is still a death. Her father was proud of her, but she would never be the knight he wished for. Aveline married Wesley Vallen while serving in the Ferelden army. They were kindred spirits and determined guardians. His death during the Blight scarred her. Not just his loss, but that she failed to protect him. Aveline has healed in the past year, but she has yet to forgive herself. Accordingly, she is fiercely protective of the Hawks and Apparition. They share a bond in loss, a connection she cherishes, but will not allow to be repeated. It is interesting that Aveline is literally named after the Aveline of legend that Liliana tells us about in Dragon Age Origins. Yeah, she dressed as a man and entered the Grand Tourney and won. But unfortunately, when she won, she lost her helmet, and the man that had just lost to her in shame, he cut her head off. And then from there, the Emperor changed the law of the land to let females be chevaliers and knights, and that's how they got that in the Dragon Age universe. Aveline's a pretty cool character. Both, actually. Sebastian Vael. In the face of danger, sometimes the bravest thing is to stand back and trust that the Maker will see justice done. Sebastian Vael is the only surviving son of the ruling family of Starkhaven, which was murdered in a violent coup d'etat. Sebastian cannot forget the irony that he still lives only because his family was so ashamed of his drinking and womanizing that they committed him to the Kirkwall Chantry against his will. After initially rejecting the priest's lifestyle, Sebastian was more surprised than anyone when he realized that his show of faith had turned real. Since then, his belief in the Maker and his plan for Thedas have been unshakable. Embracing his new role, Sebastian took vows of poverty and chastity to become a sworn brother of the Chantry, until word of his family's death forced him to take up worldly concerns once again. Grand Cleric Elthina, Sebastian's mentor and friend, hopes to convince him to walk away from the struggle for Starkhaven and return to the good works of the Chantry. Well, unfortunately for Elthina, he won't be doing that if we have any say on it, and I think that takes us all the way up to date. Indeed it does, so that was a long one. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys there, and it was an interesting read. That is going to be the perfect spot to wrap, because now we got to jump into the main Let's Play and take care of the docs. So, thank you for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, leave a like and a comment. If you want to support the cause and help improve the channel, please do check out my Patreon in the description below. Otherwise, stay tuned and I'll see you soon with more Dragon Age 2. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.